What happens when you choose one night with your ex over your husband's feelings, thinking it'll blow over by morning? How does it feel when the man you expected to beg for your love simply nods, puts your betrayal in writing, and starts practicing life without you? I never thought a harmless joke and a few secrets could end with a knock at the door and legal papers in my hand. I told my husband I'd choose one night out with my ex over his feelings, and I honestly thought he'd fight me on it. Instead, Caleb just nodded like I'd finally said the quiet part out loud, then asked me to put it in writing just so we're clear. I laughed, thinking he was being dramatic, until he opened a note on his phone and typed the sentence exactly as I said it, then sent it to himself and archived it. No threats, no insults, just documentation. Really, Caleb? You're going to document this like one of your accounting spreadsheets? I rolled my eyes, grabbing my purse from the kitchen counter. Our suburban home felt suffocating that Tuesday evening, all beige walls and careful arrangements that screamed middle-class respectability. I just want to make sure we understand each other, Evadne. His voice was calm, methodical, the same tone he used when explaining tax deductions to confuse parents at the elementary school where he worked. It's one night with Jasper. We're catching up, having drinks. You're acting like I'm running away to Vegas. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, adjusting my black dress. At 32, I still turned heads, still got attention that my quiet accountant husband never seemed to notice. Caleb stood in the doorway of his study, watching me with those careful brown eyes. "Have fun," he said, and something in his tone made me pause. But then my phone buzzed with a text from Jasper, and I forgot all about Caleb's weird mood. The drive to Jasper's apartment took 20 minutes through familiar suburban streets. Jasper Linwood had been Caleb's best friend in college, back when my husband had actually been fun, before he'd settled into his routine of early bedtimes and weekend tax prep. Jasper still lived like we were 25, in a bachelor pad filled with craft beer and vintage movie posters. "Ivy," he greeted me with that charming grin that had gotten him through college and 3 different sales jobs. "You look incredible. Marriage is treating you well." "Some parts of it," I said, accepting the wine he offered. The apartment was exactly as I remembered. Messy, lived in, exciting. Everything my perfectly organized home wasn't. We talked about work, about mutual friends, about everything except why I was really there. Jasper had always been good at reading between the lines, at making me feel like the most interesting person in the room. When he moved closer on the couch, when his hand brushed mine, I didn't pull away. "Caleb's a lucky man," he said softly. "Caleb's a careful man," I corrected. "There's a difference." The kiss happened naturally, inevitably. It tasted like wine and rebellion, and all the excitement that had been missing from my life. When I finally pulled away, Jasper was smiling. "This is crazy," I whispered, but I was smiling too. The best things usually are. I stayed until almost midnight, talking and laughing and feeling alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. When I finally drove home, I felt giddy with the secret of it, the delicious wrongness that made my heart race. The house was dark when I pulled into our driveway. I expected to find Caleb asleep, maybe a passive-aggressive note about locking up. Instead, I found something that made my stomach clench with unexpected unease. The house was too neat, not just clean, Caleb was always clean, but arranged like a showroom. His coffee mug was missing from the sink. His reading glasses weren't on the kitchen table. The mail was sorted into precise stacks, and his work shoes were lined up by the door like he was preparing for inspection. I climbed the stairs quietly, expecting to find him in our bedroom, but the bed was empty, still made with hospital corners. A sick feeling crept up my throat as I checked the guest room. There was Caleb, sleeping peacefully under the spare comforter, his clothes folded neatly on the chair. But it was the hallway that really got to me. The framed photo from our wedding, the one where we looked young and hopeful and stupid, was gone. Just gone, leaving a slightly darker rectangle on the wall where it had hung for 3 years. I stood there in my black dress, still smelling like Jasper's cologne, staring at that empty space. This wasn't punishment, this was preparation. Caleb wasn't fighting for me or trying to make me feel guilty. He was practicing life without me. The realization should have scared me, but instead, I felt a strange thrill. If Caleb wanted to play games, if he thought his silent treatment would bring me crawling back, he was about to learn how wrong he was. I had options. I had Jasper's number in my phone and the taste of freedom on my lips. Let him practice all he wanted. I was just getting started. Chapter 2. Public laughter, private coldness. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt almost normal if you ignored the growing distance between Caleb and me. He continued sleeping in the guest room, continued his methodical morning routine, continued being perfectly polite in that way that made my skin crawl. What he didn't do was ask about Jasper. He didn't demand explanations or throw jealous fits or give me any of the dramatic reactions I'd been expecting. Instead, he simply adjusted, like I was a variable in one of his equations that had changed value, and now he was recalculating accordingly. It was infuriating. "You're being ridiculous," I told him one morning as he made coffee for one. "It was dinner and drinks. We talked about college. You act like I committed murder." "I'm not acting like anything," Caleb replied, not looking up from his newspaper. "I'm just giving you the space you seem to want." "Space? You've moved into the guest room. You said you'd choose a night with him over my feelings. I'm simply respecting that choice." The calm reasonableness in his voice made me want to scream. This wasn't how marriage was supposed to work. We were supposed to fight, to yell, to have passionate makeup sex. Not this cold, polite distance that made me feel like a stranger in my own home. That's when I decided to take things public. Our friend group met every few weeks at Romano's, an Italian place downtown where the wine flowed freely and everyone felt comfortable sharing too much information. It was the perfect venue for what I had in mind. "So, Caleb's been acting weird lately," I announced after our second bottle of wine had been opened. The table included 6 of our closest friends, couples we'd known since college, people who'd been at our wedding. "He's all paranoid because I had dinner with Jasper Linwood. Remember Jasper, Caleb's old roommate?" Sarah Martinez laughed. "Jasper, the guy who convinced you to streak through the quad sophomore year?" "That's the one. We just caught up, talked about old times, and now my husband is acting like I cheated on him." I took a sip of wine, enjoying the way everyone leaned in. "He's sleeping in the guest room, barely talking to me. It's like he expects me to ask permission to see old friends." "Men can be so insecure," offered Jennifer Walsh, shooting a pointed look at her own husband. "Tom gets weird when I so much as mention my yoga instructor." "It's not insecurity," said Mike Peterson, Tom's best friend since high school. "It's about respect. Would you want your husband going out alone with his ex-girlfriend?" "Jasper wasn't my boyfriend," I protested, which was technically true. We'd just hooked up a few times before I'd started dating Caleb. "And I'm a grown woman. I don't need my husband's permission to have dinner." The conversation continued, with most of the women taking my side and the men looking uncomfortable. I felt vindicated, supported, like I was finally getting the validation that Caleb refused to provide. When I posted a group photo on social media later that night, I made sure to include the caption, "Good friends don't judge you for living your life, they support your independence. Just a girls' night, or just friendship, or just freedom." Caleb was reading when I got home, sitting in his study with a legal pad covered in his precise handwriting. He looked up when I entered, taking in my flushed cheeks and wine-bright eyes. "Good time?" he asked. "The best. Everyone thinks you're being unreasonable, by the way. Sarah said Tom would never act like this." "I'm sure she did." Caleb made a note on his pad, the pen scratching quietly in the silence. "What are you writing?" "Just keeping track of things, dates, conversations, expenses. You know how I am with documentation. Something in his tone made me step closer, trying to read over his shoulder, but he closed the pad with a soft snap. It's nothing important, he said, just organizing my thoughts. That night, I called Jasper from the guest bathroom, keeping my voice low. How are things at home? He asked, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Weird. Caleb's being all cold and mysterious. I think he's trying to make me feel guilty. Is it working? Not even close. If anything, it's making me realize how much I've been missing. When's the last time someone made me laugh the way you do? I've been thinking about you too, Jasper said softly. About that night. About what it meant. We talked for an hour, our conversation dancing around the edges of something dangerous and exciting. When I finally hung up, I felt that same giddy rush I'd experienced at his apartment. Life was too short to spend it walking on eggshells around a husband who'd rather document my behavior than fight for our marriage. The next morning, I found a printed screenshot of my social media post on the kitchen counter next to my coffee mug. No note, no explanation. Just the photo and my caption, printed on Caleb's work printer and left where I couldn't miss it. When I confronted him about it, he just shrugged. I thought you might want a copy for your scrapbook, he said. You looked happy. But there was something in his eyes, something calculating and cold, that made me wonder if Caleb was playing a game I didn't understand. A game where he was keeping score, and I was losing, without even knowing the rules. Non-baun. Chapter 3. Gossip spreads, lines are crossed. The first sign that my public venting session had backfired came on Monday morning at work. I was settling into my cubicle at Morrison Marketing, coffee in hand, and ready to tackle another day of social media campaigns for local businesses, when my supervisor, Janet, knocked on my desk. Evadne, can I see you in my office for a moment? Janet's office was all glass walls and motivational posters, the kind of space designed to look friendly while maintaining complete transparency. She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. I've been hearing some concerning things about your personal life, she began, her tone carefully neutral. Nothing specific, just chatter. You know how small our industry is here, how fast word travels. My stomach dropped. What kind of chatter? Social media posts, public conversations about marital problems. Some of our clients follow you online, Evadne. The Hendersons specifically mentioned seeing some concerning content about your marriage and your social activities. The Hendersons owned 3 restaurants in town and represented 30% of our annual revenue. They were also deeply religious and conservative, the kind of people who still believed in traditional family values and public respectability. I haven't done anything wrong, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I could feel how weak they sounded. I'm not saying you have. I'm just suggesting that maybe you keep your personal life a little more private. Social media can be tricky that way. What feels like harmless venting can look very different to clients and colleagues. I left Janet's office feeling shaken and angry. How dare people judge me based on a few social media posts? How dare they make assumptions about my marriage, my choices, my life? The unfairness of it burned in my chest as I tried to focus on work, but every time someone walked past my desk, I wondered if they'd heard the chatter too. By lunch, I needed to talk to someone who would understand, someone who wouldn't judge me for wanting more than suburban mediocrity. I texted Jasper. Can you meet for lunch? Work drama. Need a friendly face? His response came back immediately. Always. Antonio's at 1. Antonio's was a small cafe across town, far enough from my office that we wouldn't run into colleagues. Jasper was already waiting when I arrived, looking concerned and handsome in his charcoal suit. What happened? He asked, standing to hug me. The embrace lasted a few seconds longer than strictly friendly, and I didn't pull away. I told him about Janet's warning, about the gossip, about how trapped I felt between my judgmental co-workers and my cold, distant husband. Jasper listened with the kind of focused attention that Caleb never seemed to give me anymore. "You're not doing anything wrong," he said firmly. "You're a grown woman with every right to have friends, to go out, to live your life. If people want to make assumptions, that's their problem. Tell that to my boss. Tell that to my husband, who's been treating me like a stranger for weeks. Maybe Caleb's the one with the problem. Maybe he's so insecure about losing you that he's pushing you away instead of fighting for you." Jasper reached across the table and took my hand. "You deserve better than that, Ivy. You deserve someone who appreciates how amazing you are." The touch sent electricity up my arm. "Jasper, I know this is complicated. I know you're married, but I can't stop thinking about that night, about how right it felt. Can you honestly tell me you haven't thought about it too?" I couldn't. The truth was, I'd thought about little else. About his laugh, his touch, the way he made me feel desired and interesting and alive. Everything that was missing from my marriage. "This is crazy," I whispered, but I didn't pull my hand away. Crazy doesn't always mean wrong. We talked for 2 hours, our conversation growing more intimate, more charged. When he walked me to my car, he kissed me again, deeper this time, with a hunger that made my knees weak. "I want to see you again," he murmured against my ear. "Really see you." "I want that too." Driving home, I felt reckless and alive and completely justified. If Caleb wanted to play his silent game, if he preferred documentation to communication, then he was getting exactly what he deserved. I was done apologizing for wanting passion in my life. The house was empty when I arrived, which wasn't unusual. Caleb often stayed late at the school during tax season, helping parents with financial aid forms. I used the time to shower and change, to wash away the guilt that kept trying to creep in around the edges of my excitement. When Caleb finally came home at 8, I was in the kitchen making dinner for one. "Working late?" I asked, not looking up from my salad. "Parent conferences. The Johnsons needed help with their tax documents." He moved through the kitchen like a ghost, getting water, checking mail, maintaining that careful distance that had become our new normal. But as he headed toward his study, he paused. "How was lunch?" The question was casual, almost offhand, but something in his tone made my pulse quicken. "Fine. Why?" "Just curious. You seemed upset this morning." "Work stuff. Nothing important." Caleb nodded and continued to his study, but I caught a glimpse of that legal pad again, saw him make another note in his precise handwriting. What was he tracking? What was he documenting? Later that night, I called my mother for support. "Oh, honey, men are so dramatic," Roxana said when I explained the situation. "Your father went through the same phase when we were young, all jealous and possessive whenever I wanted to have fun. You just have to train them out of it." "How?" "By not giving in, by showing them that you're not going to be controlled. If Caleb wants to sulk, let him sulk. You keep living your life." My younger sister Lynn was less supportive when I called her next. "Evadne, what are you doing?" she asked bluntly. "You're married. You're having emotional affairs and broadcasting your marital problems on social media. This isn't going to end well." "It's not an affair. Jasper and I are friends." "Friends don't kiss, Ivy. Friends don't meet for secret lunches and talk about how right it feels." "I never said—" "You didn't have to. I can hear it in your voice. You're playing with fire and you're going to get burned. Worse, you're going to burn Caleb too, and he doesn't deserve that." I hung up on her, frustrated by her lack of understanding. Everyone wanted to judge me, to make me feel guilty for wanting more than a passionless marriage to a man who treated me like a roommate. Well, I was done feeling guilty. If they all thought I was having an affair anyway, maybe it was time to stop pretending otherwise. Chapter 4: Family Showdown and Social Humiliation. The confrontation I'd been dreading came 3 weeks later at Sunday dinner with Caleb's family. Eleanor Hartley had been hosting these gatherings for as long as I'd known the family, turning their traditional dining room into a battlefield of passive-aggressive comments and forced pleasantries. Caleb's sister Lydia was there with her boyfriend. his parents Richard and Eleanor, presiding over the table like judges. The conversation started innocuously enough. Work, weather, local news, but I could feel the tension building like pressure in a kettle. "Evadne, you've been awfully quiet lately," Eleanor said as she passed the potatoes. "Everything all right, dear?" "Everything's fine," I replied, shooting a glance at Caleb, who was cutting his roast beef with surgical precision. "Just busy with work and social obligations." "Social obligations," Lydia repeated, her tone sharp. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The table went quiet. Richard set down his fork with a soft clink. "Lydia," Eleanor warned, but her daughter was just getting started. "No, Mum. I'm tired of pretending everything's normal when Evadne's been humiliating my brother for weeks. The whole town is talking about her little adventures with Jasper Linwood." Heat flooded my cheeks. "Excuse me." "You heard me. Sarah Martinez's sister works at Romano's. She heard your whole performance that night, how you threw Caleb under the bus to make yourself look like some kind of victim. And don't even get me started on your social media posts." "Lydia, that's enough," Caleb said quietly, but his sister was on a roll. "Is it? Because I'm watching my brother get treated like garbage in his own marriage, and everyone's just supposed to pretend it's normal. You're having an affair, Evadne. Maybe not physically yet, but emotionally, absolutely. And you're so arrogant about it that you're advertising it to the whole world." I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "I don't have to listen to this. I'm not having an affair. I had dinner with an old friend, and now everyone wants to make it into some kind of scandal." "Dinner?" Lydia laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call the 2-hour lunch dates? The secret phone calls? The way you light up every time his name gets mentioned? How do you—" I started, then stopped. How did she know about the lunch dates? Richard cleared his throat. "Evadne, we're not trying to attack you, but this family values respect, commitment, discretion. The way you've been carrying on, it reflects poorly on all of us." "Carrying on? I'm 32 years old. I don't need permission from my in-laws to have friends." "Friends don't meet in secret," Eleanor said sadly. "Friends don't make their spouses sleep in guest rooms. Friends don't post passive-aggressive messages on the internet for everyone to see." I looked around the table, seeing judgment in every face except Caleb's. He was still eating methodically, like this conversation was happening to someone else. "Say something," I demanded. "Are you going to let them attack me like this?" Caleb looked up, his brown eyes steady and calm. "What would you like me to say, Evadne? That they're wrong? That you haven't been meeting Jasper for lunch twice a week? That you haven't been posting about our marriage problems online? That you didn't tell me you'd choose a night with him over my feelings?" The quiet certainty in his voice was devastating. No anger, no drama, just facts laid out like evidence in a trial. That's not... You're twisting things." "Am I? Because I have documentation if you'd like to review it." Documentation. That word again, delivered with the same calm precision he used for tax returns and budget reports. Lydia leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You know what the saddest part is? Jasper's been bragging about you at Murphy's bar, telling anyone who'll listen about his unhappily married friend, and how easy it was to get you back into his orbit. You think you're playing him, but honey, you're the one being played." The words hit like a slap. "That's not true." "Ask him. Next time you're having one of your secret lunches, ask him what he's been telling the guys at Murphy's. Ask him if he sees a future with you, or if you're just a fun distraction from his real life." I grabbed my purse, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. "I don't have to listen to this. You people are jealous, bitter, and completely out of line." "We're people who love Caleb," Richard said firmly. "And we're watching him get disrespected by someone who promised to honor him." I stormed out, slamming the front door behind me, but as I sat in my car in their driveway, trying to calm my breathing, I could see them through the dining room window. They weren't celebrating my departure or talking excitedly about the drama. They were comforting Caleb, gathering around him like a protective wall. And Caleb Caleb was writing in that damn legal pad again. When I got home, I called Jasper immediately, needing to hear his voice, needing reassurance that Lydia was wrong about everything. "Hey, beautiful," he answered, but something in his tone was different, distant. "I need to see you. Tonight. Can you come over?" "Tonight's not good, Ivy. I've got plans." "Plans? What kind of plans?" "Just plans. Look, maybe we should cool things down a bit. People are starting to talk, and I don't want things to get complicated." The words felt like ice water in my veins. "Complicated? Jasper, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we got a little carried away. You're married, I'm not looking for anything serious, and this whole thing is starting to feel messy." "Messy?" I repeated, my voice rising. 3 weeks ago you said I deserved better. You said what we had felt right." "It did feel right, in the moment, but moments pass, Ivy. Reality doesn't." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in my empty kitchen, holding a dead phone and feeling like the world's biggest fool. Lydia had been right. I was the one being played, and somewhere in the house I could hear Caleb moving around, probably adding this phone call to his growing collection of documentation. Chapter 5. The calm before the storm. The weeks following the family dinner passed in a haze of mounting dread and stubborn denial. Jasper's rejection had stung more than I wanted to admit, but I told myself it was his loss, that he was just scared of real intimacy. The alternative, that I'd blown up my marriage for a man who saw me as nothing more than an easy conquest, was too humiliating to accept. Caleb's behavior became even more unsettling in its normalcy. He continued his routines, continued sleeping in the guest room, continued being polite and distant, but there were small changes that made my skin crawl. Important papers disappeared from our home office. Bank statements stopped coming to the house. His laptop, which used to sit openly on the kitchen counter, now lived in his locked study. When I asked about it, he just said he was organizing our finances and streamlining our paperwork. Nothing I could argue with, nothing that sounded unreasonable. But the cumulative effect was like watching someone methodically pack for a trip they hadn't mentioned taking. The social isolation was worse. Our friend group had clearly chosen sides, and it wasn't mine. Invitations stopped coming. Group texts went quiet when I joined them. Sarah Martinez, who'd been so supportive at Romano's, now barely acknowledged me at the grocery store. "They're all hypocrites," I told my mother during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls, acting like they've never had problems in their marriages. "Of course they are, honey," Roxana agreed. "Small-town people love to tear down anyone who refuses to settle for mediocrity. You just keep your head high and remember that you're worth more than their judgment." But even my mother's support felt hollow now. When I pressed her for specifics, for actual advice on how to fix things with Caleb, she just repeated the same platitudes about not letting men control you. She wasn't interested in saving my marriage. She was interested in being right about marriage being a patriarchal institution designed to suppress women. Lynn had stopped taking my calls entirely. Work became my only refuge, but even that was compromised. Janet had made it clear that my personal drama was affecting our professional relationships, and I could feel my colleagues' eyes on me whenever I took a personal call or checked social media. The Hendersons had specifically requested that I be removed from their account, citing philosophical differences that everyone knew meant they thought I was an adulteress. It was during this period of growing isolation that I made my biggest mistake. I was having lunch alone at a cafe downtown, scrolling through social media and feeling sorry for myself, when I saw a post from Jasper. He was at some work event, arm around a blonde woman I didn't recognize, both of them laughing at something off camera. The caption read, "Great night with great company. Some people are worth the wait. New beginnings. In happiness." The jealousy that hit me was immediate and overwhelming. This was the man who'd kissed me, who'd told me I deserved better, who'd made me feel alive again. and now he was posting about some other woman like I'd never existed. Without thinking, I commented, "Looks fun. Remember when you used to think I was worth the wait?" Good times had memories. I posted it in a moment of wine-fueled spite, wanting to embarrass him, to remind his new girlfriend that she wasn't his first choice. But within an hour, I realized what I'd done. The comment was public, visible to anyone who followed either of us, including Caleb, who followed Jasper from their college days, including everyone in our social circle who was already watching my every move for signs of impropriety. I tried to delete the comment, but screenshots live forever, and by evening, it was making the rounds on local social media like wildfire. My phone buzzed with notifications, friends sharing the screenshot, strangers commenting on my desperation, acquaintances expressing shock at my public meltdown. Janet called me at home that night. "Evadne, we need to talk first thing Monday morning. This has gone too far." When Caleb came home from his evening walk, a new routine he'd developed since moving to the guest room, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and my laptop open to the social media disaster. "Rough day?" he asked, hanging his jacket in the closet with his usual precision. "You saw it." "I saw it." "Are you going to lecture me too? Tell me how embarrassing I am, how I'm ruining your reputation." Caleb poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, studying me with those calm brown eyes. "No, I think you're doing a fine job of that yourself. God, I hate when you do that. When you act all superior and reasonable. Just yell at me, Caleb. Get angry. Show me you actually care about what happens to us." "I did care," he said quietly. "For a long time, I cared very much. But caring about someone who's determined to destroy herself is exhausting, Evadne. At some point, you have to step back and let them do what they're going to do. So that's it. You're just giving up on us." "I'm not giving up on anything. I'm accepting reality. You made your choice weeks ago. I'm just finally making mine." He headed toward his study, then paused at the doorway. "By the way, you might want to check your email. There are some documents you'll need to review." My hands shook as I opened my laptop and navigated to my email. There, sent from Caleb's personal account at 6:47 p.m., was a message with the subject line, "Important documents, please review." Attached were PDFs I couldn't open on my laptop, but the email itself was brief and businesslike. "Evadne, please review the attached documents at your earliest convenience. We'll need to discuss next steps soon. I've taken the liberty of organizing our financial records and important papers for clarity. Everything is documented and ready for review. Caleb." I stared at the screen, my wine-fogged brain trying to process what I was reading. Financial records, documentation, next steps. This wasn't a husband trying to save his marriage. This was a man preparing to end one. And somewhere in the house, I could hear him in his study, making more notes in that legal pad, documenting my latest public humiliation with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt genuinely afraid. Chapter 6. Strictly Legal, the Final Move. Monday morning brought the meeting with Janet that I'd been dreading, but even my worst fears hadn't prepared me for the reality. "We're letting you go, Evadne," she said without preamble, sliding a manila envelope across her desk. "Effective immediately. 2 weeks severance, continuation of health benefits for 30 days, and a recommendation letter that focuses on your professional skills rather than your personal conduct." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're firing me for a social media comment. I'm firing you for a pattern of unprofessional behavior that's affecting our business relationships. The Henderson account was just the beginning. 3 other clients have expressed concerns about your judgment and discretion. We can't afford to lose any more business." I tried to argue, to explain, to promise it would never happen again, but Janet's mind was made up. Security walked me to my desk, to collect my personal items, a humiliation that felt like a public execution. My former colleagues watched from their cubicles, some with sympathy, others with barely concealed satisfaction. The drive home was a blur of tears and rage. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? 6 weeks ago, I'd been a successful marketing coordinator with a stable marriage and a solid social life. Now I was unemployed, friendless, and married to a man who treated me like a stranger. The house was empty when I arrived, which gave me time to compose myself before facing Caleb's inevitable questions. But as I walked through our home, I noticed more changes that made my stomach clench with anxiety. His personal items were gone from the bathroom. His clothes had been completely removed from our bedroom closet. The study door was locked, and when I tried the handle, it didn't budge. Even his coffee mug, the blue ceramic one I'd bought him for his birthday, was missing from the kitchen cabinet. It was like watching someone erase himself from our shared life, one small detail at a time. When Caleb came home that evening, I was waiting for him in the living room, with a bottle of wine and a desperate need to fix whatever had broken between us. "We need to talk," I said, before he could escape to his study. "I agree." He sat across from me, maintaining that careful distance that had become our norm. "Did you review those documents I sent?" "I couldn't open them. My laptop doesn't have the right software. Caleb, I lost my job today." If I expected sympathy or concern, I was disappointed. He just nodded like I'd told him the weather forecast. "I'm sorry to hear that. Though given recent events, it's not entirely surprising." "Recent events? You mean the social media thing? That was one comment, one mistake. It was the final mistake in a series of increasingly poor decisions. But we're not here to discuss your employment situation." He pulled out a manila envelope from his briefcase, the same type Janet had given me that morning. "These are copies of the documents I emailed you. I think you'll find them easier to review in hard copy." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The first page was a petition for divorce, filed in the county court, dated 3 days ago. My name was listed as the respondent, Caleb as the petitioner. The grounds were irreconcilable differences, but attached were exhibits that told a different story. Exhibit A, screenshots of my social media posts, dating back 6 weeks, with timestamps and context. Exhibit B, credit card statements showing my lunches with Jasper, highlighted in yellow. Exhibit C, phone records showing the duration and frequency of our calls. Exhibit D, a printed copy of my comment on Jasper's photo, along with screenshots of the public response. Exhibit E, a sworn affidavit from a witness at Romano's restaurant, detailing my public complaints about our marriage. There were more exhibits, more documentation, more evidence of every poor choice I'd made presented with legal precision. It was like reading an autopsy report of my own marriage. "You've been planning this," I whispered, staring at the papers. "For weeks, you've been building a case against me." "I've been protecting myself," Caleb corrected, "and documenting the truth. Everything in those exhibits is factual, Evadne. Nothing is taken out of context or misrepresented." "This is insane. People don't divorce their spouses for having friends." "You're right. They divorce them for having affairs, for public humiliation, for choosing other people over their marriage. Which, according to your own words, is exactly what you did." The calm reasonableness in his voice was terrifying. This wasn't an emotional decision made in anger. It was a calculated business transaction executed with methodical precision. "What about counseling? What about trying to work things out? What about for better or worse?" "I suggested counseling 8 months ago when you started complaining about being bored. You said I was being dramatic. I suggested date nights, weekend trips, activities we could do together. You said I was being clingy. I asked you to consider my feelings before pursuing a relationship with Jasper. You said you'd choose him over me." Each point was delivered like evidence in a trial, building an irrefutable case for his decision. "I never had a physical affair," I said desperately. "No, you had something worse. You had an emotional affair that you flaunted publicly, humiliating me in front of our friends, family, and community. You made our private problems into public entertainment. Caleb, please, we can fix this. I'll cut contact with Jasper completely. I'll be more careful about social media. I'll do whatever you want. For the first time since this conversation started, something flickered in his eyes. Not hope, but something sadder. The thing is, Evadne, I don't want you to do anything anymore. I don't want to monitor your behavior, or worry about your choices, or wonder what you're really thinking when you say you love me. I want peace, I want honesty. I want a partner who chooses me first, not someone I have to convince to respect our marriage. I do choose you. I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to fix this. You're here because Jasper rejected you and you lost your job. If he'd asked you to leave with him, would you be sitting in this room right now? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and my silence was answer enough. Caleb stood up, straightening his tie with the same precision he brought to everything else. The papers are filed. My attorney will be in touch with yours. You'll want to get one soon. I've opened a separate bank account and transferred my portion of our assets. The house is in both our names, so we'll need to discuss how to handle that. This is really happening. This happened weeks ago, Evadne. I'm just making it official. He headed toward his study, then paused at the doorway. For what it's worth, I did love you, very much. But I love myself too much to stay married to someone who sees me as a backup plan. That night, alone in our empty house, I tried calling everyone I could think of. Jasper didn't answer. My mother went straight to voicemail after 2 rings. Lynn finally picked up on the 3rd try. He filed for divorce, I sobbed into the phone. I know, she said quietly. He called me this afternoon, asked if I thought you had anywhere to stay while things get sorted out. He wants me to move out. He wants to buy out your half of the house. He's offering fair market value, Ivy. More than fair, actually. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of people taking responsibility for their actions. You made your choices, Evadne. Now you get to live with the consequences. She hung up, leaving me alone with the legal papers and the devastating realization that I'd lost everything for a man who'd never wanted me, and a freedom that had turned out to be just another word for loneliness. 3 days later, a process server knocked on my door with additional papers. Caleb had filed for an expedited divorce based on my documented infidelity and abandonment of marital duties. His attorney had included a settlement offer that was generous but final. I could take the money and walk away quietly, or we could go to court and let a judge decide based on the evidence. I signed the papers that afternoon. 6 months later, I was living in a studio apartment across town, working temp jobs and watching Caleb's life through social media like a ghost haunting her own past. He'd kept the house, gotten a promotion at work, and started dating a teacher from his school, a quiet, pretty woman who looked at him like he hung the moon. They looked happy in their photos, peaceful, like 2 people who'd chosen each other first and meant it. I'd gotten exactly what I'd asked for. Freedom from a man who'd loved me enough to let me go, rather than fight for someone who didn't want to be kept. It was the most expensive lesson I'd ever learned.